The minister has given me permission to use data. What cannot be measured does not exist as a problem. So let me also begin with the numbers. We do look at cities as, or we should be looking at cities as creators of jobs, creators of growth. Mr. Junaid Ahmed has just released a copy of India Development Report, and they are projecting that we should be reaching 8% shortly. Cities will have to be the engines of that growth. And just one more figure to prove that. India's percentage of population dependent on agriculture is 44%. And the percentage of GDP coming from agriculture is 11%. Agriculture and allied is 17%, but agriculture alone out of agriculture and allied is 60%. So, you know, it's 44% population and 11% of GDP output. I'm not comparing agriculture or grain output across countries, but the total of people dependent on agriculture in Australia, a rather large agrarian country, is 3%, and in the United States it is 2%. So that would be a measure of the amount of jobs cities will have to create. Of course, there will be non-agrarian rural jobs which will shoulder part of the burden. But if we have to grow, we just cannot expect that such a large part of India's population will account for just about 10% of the output. To increase productivity across cities will have to generate productivity, jobs, and growth. They have to be the engines. And then the other set of numbers, the money for it. As you pointed out, sir, 4,000 cities have a total budget of 1,30,000. Of that, 25,000 crores is Mumbai. So it's actually 3,999 cities with a budget of 1,05,000 crores. So we have to talk money and numbers. So, Mr. Puri, let me start with you. You're just 6 months into the job, and another 13 months, 14 months to go before you'll have to renew your work permit. So if you can tell us what will be the most important thing that you are hoping to achieve in these 4,000 cities, or even in 500 cities of Amrit in the 13 months. What's one goal that you would want to achieve?
No, I think the goals have set themselves. I mean, I walked into a situation in which there were flat. Thank you. I walked.
It's okay.
Normally the guy who doesn't need the mic.
No, it is. You just have to keep it close.
I walked into a situation in which the goals and objectives had already defined themselves, and these are the main flagship programs. Amrut, Swachh Bharat Mission, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and the Smart Cities program. Now all of these have cut-off dates, and those cut-off dates may not have been fixed with the renewal of the work permit in mind. I mean, they were fixed independently depending on the scale and ambition of the project. The Swachh Bharat scheme, for instance, was announced from the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th August 2014. And the clear message from the Prime Minister was that by the time we reach the 150th birth anniversary of the Mahatma, which is 2nd October 2019, by that time India should be 100% OD free, open defecation free, and it should have 100% of scientific waste management. Okay. Insofar as that target is concerned, I have no doubt that the targets which involve building a certain number of toilets, like 67 lakh, they'll be met. I mean, met well before October 2019. I'll do it before October 2018. There are other issues. There is some augmentation will be required on the waste management. But there is also an issue of behavioral change.
Yes.
Now that, I think, I am encouraged that Jan Andolan is taking place. But whether we get there or not, that will, we need to continue to press on that. Okay. Swachh Bharat, clear. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the date is 2022, and 12 million homes have to be built so that every Indian citizen has a home he or she can call their own, which they own. Again, I don't see any problem in the target being met. Now it's an issue of resources. We've already sanctioned something like 4.3 lakhs. We are sanctioning at the rate of 300 to 500,000 for the credit-linked subsidy scheme. Land is being provided by the government, direct subsidies by the state and central government. So we'll get the number, but we need the resources. This can't now come from there. So we set up an affordable housing fund. Smart cities, again, this is not a work permit related deadline. It will probably go on 2020, 2022. But listen, these are only 100. You have something like 7,000 cities. So hopefully this is a trial run, lighthouse effect, demonstration, and then the success of these 100 smart cities will in turn encourage other cities, and there's already traction, more people want to come in. So what is the main issue? Vigorous implementation.
Absolutely. All right, I take your point, but since you've touched on accounts and money, I'll turn to you on that, Mr. Kant. Money will always be the issue because there is enough data to say that there isn't enough funds at all at the municipal level. They don't even have money to provide probably 40% of their own salaries. So municipalities and municipal corporations will have to generate their own resources. What can NITI Aayog do? Can we, for starters, ensure that all municipal corporations and municipal councils get audited accounts? Is that possible at all within what, next 13, 14 months?
Well, my personal view is that, firstly, it's for the states to really push this. I mean, many of these municipalities fall within the domain of the state governments, and I'm personally of the view that there's very little that the central government can do. I mean, the states must delegate authority, must monitor very closely, and the issues of, municipalities don't monetize, how is urbanization taking place in other parts of the world? I mean, in other parts of the world, urbanization is taking place because they created infrastructure, monetized values, put market-related prices on infrastructure, and recovered it from the citizens. And that's how, if you expect states to put in resources for urbanization all along, that'll, I mean, look at a place like Allahabad. Allahabad, the revenues of municipal water supply has not been raised from 1972 onwards. I mean, you don't do this. I mean, if you do this, municipalities will not have the resources. That's simple as that.
No, as NITI Aayog, where do you see your role? Can you give a model conduct for municipal corporations? I was speaking about auditing because then they can raise bonds, mini bonds. I mean, hopefully that will be one source of revenue. So can NITI Aayog come in the form of a model code of conduct for municipalities and ensure auditing?
So NITI's job is really one of advocacy, and one of the things we've done is to work very closely with the government of Singapore and taken many of these municipalities, elected mayors, city commissioners, and put all the best practices in, on management of all infrastructure facilities, exposed it to them, show them what the best facilities in India are and what can be replicated across the states. I mean, it's not NITI's job to get into day-to-day implementation.
No, not at all.
So our job is to really make them aware of what are the best practices around. Our belief is that cities are really the centers of growth. They're the centers of creativity. They are institutions which will drive India's growth forward, and it's very critical that they are very well governed. And therefore, our job is really to put the best practices from across the world, how public transportation is done in Curitiba, how water is managed in Singapore, how, Yokohama was able to reduce its waste by 49% by a young mayor, how Kitakyushu became the best, smartest city in the world by, and how the women there rose in revolt against the government when it became the most polluted city. We've exposed a whole lot of mayors and city commissioners around to these best practices. Okay. And it's actually for states to really force a lot of more delegation onto the city mayors and bring in the best practices to get implemented then.
Okay. No, there's no denying that there is the layer of state government between the central government and the municipal.
And if you think that as urban minister, Mr. Puri is going to bring all the radical changes, we are all sadly mistaken. It's the states, it's a lot of authority has to be taken by municipalities and a lot of delegation has to be done by the state governments.
We can design an ecosystem which we have, and we've asked the states to be, these cities to be graded. And once they are graded, they can raise the bonds. As two of them have done, as Pune and Hyderabad have done. But I think 38 of them have already got the requisite grading to be able to raise those finances. And absolutely as Amitabh says, we can encourage them. But you cannot get the level and ambition of urbanization which you are looking for through grants from the state government or through, persuasion by the state government. But I think the good news is that people are catching on. And people are catching on, but they're also, as exposure to what's happening in the rest of the world, they're also catching on to how it's being done, and they need to be encouraged on that.
No, I'm actually very confident or hopeful that the states will become engines of further devolution of both power and growth, simply because almost overnight, in 2 years, we have created a GST council which actually is far more powerful in taking decisions faster than the Rajya Sabha ever did, which was supposed to be the Council of States. So it's quite possible that we could get the GST council, after it is through with its GST rules, to perhaps remain a machinery which will perhaps be a states forum for other decisions. But I'll come to that in just a minute. Let's look at cross-country experiences. Junaid, if I can come to you on that. From an emerging economy perspective, Janaagraha has graded Johannesburg at 7.6. That's one of the BRICS countries, cities, aspiring to an 8.8 that London and New York would be a stretch. But what is it that you can give as a formula which has worked in an emerging market city, emerging market economy city, and transformed it in relatively short period?
So Latha, let me not answer that question.
Okay.
I really want to pick up where the two policymakers of India have put out some very important facts. Okay, let me be provocative, and I'll use Amitabh's, in my personal opinion. That way we separate my institution from what I'm saying. I think the time has come for government of India to stop centrally sponsored schemes. Right? Let the states handle their cities. Let federalism really hit India in its fullest. Because I don't think we're going to get the type of municipal leadership emerging or municipal accountability emerging unless states are pushed to realize that without empowering their municipalities, they will not actually achieve growth. So the best way to do it is let competitive federalism really take it on. Right? Centrally sponsored schemes of India need to turn into completely incentive-driven programs, or they're just simple fiscal transfers with no conditions attached, but really push the story to the federal level. I don't think looking at examples from other countries is really going to matter. There is a story of India that's going to come from within India, right? And the question is how to unleash that. And after working almost 2 decades on Indian cities and watching the whole story of centrally sponsored scheme, my conclusion is shut down the centrally sponsored schemes. Let states take on. And let's not worry about equity. Let's not say, oh, but Maharashtra is richer than Jharkhand. How will we equalize? I think competitive federalism will do much better at equalizing than equalizing federalism, that the centrally sponsored schemes are emerging.
No, actually, the 14th Finance Commission did that. They did transfer about 10 percentage point more of finances from the center to the states and made the centrally sponsored schemes state schemes. So, they didn't make it state schemes. They were free to take it or leave it, but the money got transferred and the center is no longer responsible for those schemes. So to some extent, the first step in that has been taken.
Also, there are other differentials which are built in. Other differentials built into the system. For instance, you cannot, take states like the Northeast or hill states. You need to do a little more for them. Therefore, if you I'm not going into any scheme. If you conceptually have, let's say, a 60-40 or a 50-50 arrangement generally, for the Northeast, you do 80-20. And
we're doing 90-10.
90-10, exactly. So, in other words, you have already removed the anchor from state-sponsored in the traditional sense, and you are moving in. Most of the proposals I'm working on now are anchored in incentivization.
But Latha, there was a very important point which Junaid made, and that was about linking up incentives. So if you are performing well, I mean, and now that we're getting into this business of competitive federalism, you started ranking states. So on ease of doing business, when we ranked Gujarat, the first year, Gujarat came #1, but the very second year, Telangana and Andhra beat Gujarat.
Yes.
And but the good story was that the eastern part of India, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, did very well. And if you look at, and if you were able to capture the delta, the change over a period of, in that 1 year, we've just finished the health index with World Bank. We find Jharkhand and Jammu and Kashmir have done very well on health. Now, they should get an incentive. I mean, the centrally sponsored scheme should be to encourage states which have performed well. Either you perform or you perish. And that should be really the motto of central government. So similarly on education, I mean, you will not be able to improve India on nutrition, health and education unless you don't back good performance.
No.
My view is that good governance must become good politics. Put that ranking out in public domain. People must vote for those who are performing, and central government must support those who are delivering.
Okay. No, I completely take your point about Junaid, about leave the cities to compete and win or compete and perish. But there are. I just want to get Yuri into the conversation, Yuri and Naina, and then pose the questions to y'all. I mean, the numbers we have, 54% of the cities do not generate enough revenue to meet their salary costs. At this juncture, to ask them to sink or swim is perhaps more a verdict of making them sink, I would think. But I'll come back to you to reply on that.
Not a bad idea.
No, bad idea. I would think I belong to a city which is a huge urban conglomerate, urban sprawl, and to leave it to, I guess Mumbai pays what, more than 50% of the taxes, but how much do we get back?
No, Mumbai will swim very well.
Okay.
You stop all assistance, it'll raise its own resources.
Okay. No, that ought to be. But let me first ask Yuri. Yuri, you've watched several Indian cities work. Now, what is it from emerging market examples, from BRICS country examples, that India can copy and get right?
Look, here I think I'm actually with Junaid. India will invent its own solutions and develop its own approaches. Enlightened, informed knowledge, fine. And their networks exist, but in order to do that, let me come back to something that kind of popped up in the comments but was not really named, and says, since Junaid opened the doors of disassociating himself from his organization, let me do the same, and say, I think in the next 15 to 20 years, the biggest problem in Indian urbanization will be in the area of governance. And, today the most vibrant networks for cities to develop is mayor-to-mayor networks. I mean, these are the networks that, in spite of the United States pulling out of the climate, agreement, are still pushing the U.S. to achieve fairly impressive results in the green economy and green energy. In Europe, the most vibrant network is not among countries. Regions are now competing, but the most vibrant one is among cities. India's system of governance, and it's fine, look, I'm not saying you need to change it tomorrow, it has to be an evolution. It comes from a historical fact that the minister has referred to in his opening speech, that you were largely a rural economy until very, very recently. And so it's not out of this world that, the power is concentrated in the states. And the political system is also linked to that concept, so it has to be an evolution, but you need to have fully empowered mayors that can raise their taxes, that have an elected assembly, that have, independent audits.
And a longer tenure.
Right. I mean, when you think of the state of New York, to use an extreme example, nobody really thinks of Albany, right? Everybody thinks of the city of New York, right? In the same way, if you parallel it to Maharashtra, Maharashtra will be Maharashtra, but Bombay would be Bombay, right? And indeed, it can raise its taxes, it can generate more GDP growth, and it can be financially viable and attract private investment. But unless that governance is tweaked, you will never have an owner in a city. And take Bombay, which is what today, 20 million, over 20 million?
22.
I'm sorry, most countries are smaller than that. So I do not know why in the long term, Indian cities need to be run from the state perspective. I think they need to be run from a city perspective. And that's also the way to bring increased democracy into the cities, because when citizens of Bombay or Delhi vote for their leader, then they can keep them accountable to whatever is promised. So I think, again, coming back to your question, I think inspirational stories are there, and there are all kinds of cities today that are doing amazing things, not only in the north and in the west, but in the south and all four continents. I mean, look at Korea, look at Singapore, look at Kuala Lumpur, I mean, look at even cities in Africa. You've just mentioned Joburg, but there are others. So look at Latin America, you know, what is happening in Buenos Aires and other places. So there's a lot of inspiration, but India will always regurgitate and digest, and that is exactly how it should be. And come out with its own solution. But I think the basic lines still need to be there.
Well, you know, see, the UN report that Janaagraha's, the survey quotes, saying that poor spatial planning may be costing up to 3% of GDP. That's a UN report. Now, that's a huge number, 3% of GDP. Are there any examples of how other developing countries are coping with spatial planning?
Well, look, I mean, I think the long-term hard line is that given that we're going to have 9 billion people on this planet by mid-century, and in India...
A quarter of that.
A quarter of that. And in that quarter, you know, I don't think it's even going to be 50. I think it's going to be 60 or 70% are going to live in urban environments. Cities need to be compact. They need to go up rather than sideways. The bigger the footprint, the more the impact on the climate, on the environment, on the ecosystems.
More compact cities and fewer sprawling.
Absolutely, and the minister will probably confirm that creating and building an infrastructure in a compact city and providing services in a compact city is 1/10 of the price than in a sprawled kind of urban environment that is largely 3 to 4.
Choice of either going vertical or going into urban sprawl, which is...
I know, but given that India is, you know, 1/6 of Russia's territory, Russia can afford it, India can't. And so India has to go up, but in a resilient, sustainable way that is, you know, disaster protected and resilient to earthquakes. But I don't think, given your density of population, you have a solution. So urban planning becomes expensive, complicated, but if you do it well, once you lay the groundwork for the next 50 years.
Okay, that's where I would think that NITI Aayog could come with a model plan. But 1 minute, Mr. Kant, let me get Naina into it. Naina, you just authored a book on, you know, exactly urban problems, sanitation, and waste disposal. You know, as a watcher, I'm collecting data for a book. What do you think the central government can do? We don't have state government representatives here. So they're putting everything on their table or on their plate because they're not present here. But what do you think the central government can do?
So I think for a start, we need to really going down the track that Yuri suggests on what is that ideal city. And there's a lot of work with that a think tank I work with called the New Climate Economy has done, which is around compact and connected cities. The idea of compact being vertical, but it's not just going vertical, it's vertical with green spaces. So the thought is, of course, to maintain that. And I think Amrut and others are really setting some of this thinking in the new plans. It's not easy to suddenly wipe out all the buildings you have, but we must at least have what that ideal structure looks like.
Exactly.
Which we don't. So to that extent, yes, NITI Aayog exposing our existing teams, and I'm very glad that's happening, but the trouble is those guys who go and see are not going to be there tomorrow, so I don't know who we're exposing this stuff to. But we need to build a cadre of people who are municipal commissioners, who stay there, who are trained, and to create an environment there where outsiders who want to give of their energy and time can come. Now, I have seen examples, and to your point, in Africa and Uganda, the municipality there vacated some space for cleaning of sanitation and waste, the various urban slums, and they have them as much as we do, and allowed private entrepreneurs to operate in a full, seamless, go-in, totally clean method of collecting the waste where no human being needed to touch anything in little loos in slums which are no better than ours, all the way to the way it is treated. So why are we in our municipality so dog in the mangerish about what we can't do, and won't let others do? So how do we open it up to a spirit of entrepreneurship where a private entrepreneur is happy, forget even having the courage to, but be happy to go in and work because he knows the rules and regulations won't change. And to that point, I would also add that in the space of sanitation, the experiments which India is starting in distributed sanitation are critical. The time and money that it takes to build these huge sewage plants, which we do not have, and most of our cities don't even treat 50% of our waste, the ability to do it through FSTPs, smaller plants, which can be paid for by citizens. So some of these FSTPs can be as little as 800 rupees a year for a citizen in a middle class RWA to support is not impossible. But we do not have the people who know how to build it. Yes, there are institutions which will come in and companies that will come in. But we need a whole body of entrepreneurs who can maintain these FSTPs, that can run them, that have accountability, rules, ratings, and citizens who understand why they're paying for it. And when you pay, you make the delivery of that service accountable. So citizens' ownership of some of these issues is also key. And it can only happen if we are aware of it. And I'll just end by saying, we often have the rules. So buildings over a certain size have to have their own sewage treatment plants. Every builder ticks the box. 6 months later, that plant isn't operating because the quality of what has been built has not been checked. Somebody ticked a box, and honest citizens go in, buy the flat, but they don't even know that they should be looking to see that this aspect is addressed and seen. So there's awareness at the citizen level, transparency, and regulations that need to be adhered to and seriously punished on these matters. These are crimes and they should be treated as crimes, but we let them go.
Well, the good news is that a lot of that is happening in Mumbai now. Buildings without a waste disposal system or buildings above a particular size just have to, have waste disposal systems as well as water harvesting. I mean, some of it is a sign of hope.
Have to operate. Everyone ticks the box on we put it in, but what you've put in does not operate the way it should.
Okay, no, it operates in my building, which is why I said that. But you were going to say
I was just, because you put the question to Naina, what should the central government be doing?
Yes.
I think fundamentally, these are schemes which will not succeed as the Swachh Bharat mission has shown, or smart cities, unless they have full citizen involvement. So you've got to take the narrative out of the silos of the bureaucracy and the ministries and take it out into the marketplace, involve civil society, private sector, and so on. Now I can just share with you something that I have done, initiated. For the Smart Cities program, and I've anchored it in the Smart Cities program because I know from there it can spread to the other cities. I'm establishing 9 separate groups. One, for instance, just to give some examples, for differently abled people, You bring in people who have done work on that, motivated citizens, people who've written about it. They will spend 3 months, look at the issue, see whether the Smart City program has enough safeguards, enough provisions to provide for differently abled people. Another group for young professionals, startups, etc. One for women, both dealing with security and empowerment issues. Public spaces to be used for public art. So they're almost ready, and I propose in the next 3 or 4 days to start releasing them. And they will not be anchored in the ministry. That's something that for instance, the one on women will be anchored in the National Institute of Urban Affairs with Jagan. Then ORF will take another one. Sunita Narayan will do something. Again, the very point that you're making about smaller waste treatment plant. Look, the issue is that the policies are in place. Policies on waste to compost, waste to energy, but you have to implement those. And I don't think the implementation will receive the success that they deserve if they are left to the government. So you've got to get civil society in, you've got to get, and I'm very encouraged. There are a lot of good people in civil society, in the think tank, wanting to provide those ideas.
But yes and no, because the failure has been that regulation is such that it is not friendly. and to go in and know that a politician may come and suddenly waive your costs that you are incurring and waive the price that you could take for recovery are very big worries. So what we have to have is sacrosanct rules and protection for entrepreneurs and private industry to enter. And they will come. We have multinationals that are dying to run our water treatment plants. We have local
We are at the
entrepreneurs
stage just
that
now
are-
of just getting the ideas. If you want to give the scheme or way to someone to run, that's a secondary phase. All I'm wanting to do now is to ensure that the implementation of these schemes, which just now in Swachh Bharat is shown, it's got everybody's in it, and everybody's doing it out of love. Once those ideas are there, at the end of the day, which contract to award where, that is the domain of the special purpose vehicle. They'll have to decide whether they want to give the contract to X or Y, and that is where the rules being sacrosanct to make sure that issues are, we don't have a regulator for 70 years in real estate. I mean, that's a starting point.
Yeah, no, but Mr. Minister, just to, develop on the point, as Junaid said, or all of you have been saying, ultimately citizens have to own, any project, whether it is the spatial planning or whether it's waste disposal or any of the nitty-gritties have to be owned by the citizens. Can the central government put up something in terms of a model for, say, area sabhas that the report talks about, which are existing in 2 cities, or, ward councils, or the ombudsman? If you say that this is the model city, probably, by example, this could go. Yes, Junaid, you want to add on that?
I'm not convinced that the center creating models is actually going to replicate.
The models must come from
It has to come from below. And I think Naina put something on the table that's very important. We have the 74th Amendment story. So you allow federalism, 74th Amendment, you bring governments closer to people is one model. The other model is that political reality may not happen. So look at what Uganda did in Kampala, which is they took away the 74th Amendment of the mayor. In its place, they put a city manager who actually has control over resources, functions, functionaries.
And responsible too?
Absolutely responsible. So
responsible, is he elected?
no. So here's the challenge. If you create a municipal cadre that can indeed be responsible for the special purpose vehicle, the development authority, the municipality, and under one authority, then the creation of an integrated approach, I think, is a very powerful story. That's the China story, and that's the Uganda story. So either you go directly into elections, or you're saying, I'm going to create a municipal cadre, but that has the ability to manage, plan, and deliver. You cannot have a halfway house, which is what India has right now. And because you go to a city, you're not sure whether the municipality is in charge, or the development authority is in charge, or the municipal commissioner is in charge, or the special purpose vehicle is in charge. You have to bring it under one authority.
As the Janaagraha report says, there are 4 problems running simultaneously: citizen empowerment, lack of resources, financial resources, personal resources. They're all running parallel. And of course, legislative powers of the mayor or the municipal commissioner, as the case may be. So, what's the answer, if I may? Well, is the answer a creation of a municipal cadre? How do we are addressing several problems simultaneously. But this, if it's worked in some larger emerging market cities, is creation of a municipal cadre the reason? I mean, look at the data. 35% of the average staff is not appointed. The staff vacancy is 35% average. Yeah, 60, exactly. This is an average, and therefore there are some extreme examples of 60%. So is creation of a cadre an answer? Since you're from the IAS, you would be better placed to answer that.
No, I don't think we need to be so despondent, I mean.
We're not despondent. We're aspiring higher.
No, Swati and Ramesh do a great job, of this annual survey. But it's important to understand that as a country, we've neglected urban governance for 67 years. We brought it centerfold. For 67 years, this country, every single scheme of this government was for rural development. whereas every single person from rural area wanted to move to urban area.
Exactly.
And, I mean, you have the story of Mumbai, where Shiv Sena brought down FAR from 4 to 1, saying that if you don't have vertical cities, people from Bihar and UP will not get inside Mumbai. But they kept coming, and because you didn't allow a city to go vertical, all these slums came up. So, I mean, the important thing is that in the last 3 years, the government has put urbanization centerfold. This is the first time you have 100 smart cities, you have Amrut, you have a training of urban cadre, huge focus on urban governance, and you have a lot of good stories coming out. I mean, look at Indore, look at Pune, look at very many two-tier cities. A lot of good stories are also coming out, which need to be told. I mean, there is all this. And the great thing is that Janaagraha is ranking cities, and I think this will put a huge pressure on cities, and I think all of us should take ownership of this ranking, put it in public domain, and force the cities to improve. And I think make good governance really good politics with this ranking. But, the important thing is that for 67 years, urban cadre has been taught that sprawls are good. They've all grown up on the American model of urbanization, that you can create cities like Atlanta where 99.9% of the people travel by cars. American car companies actually drove the urbanization of America. They actually bought over railway companies and destroyed them. Yeah, that's the story. And all our urban planners actually were trained there. So I think the most important thing for us is really to train our urban planners for compact, dense, vertical cities, but with good quality urban infrastructure first and public mobility. To my mind, the key is good cycling, good walking, and growing on buses and BRTs. We're spending too much money. Every city wants a metro. Metros will go bust, let me tell you this. Lucknow, Jaipur, etc. will do very poorly in metros. You need buses, you need really good BRT systems, like Ahmedabad has shown us. You need cities for cycling. When I was growing up in Delhi, I used to cycle 20 kilometers to go to my school and back. Nobody cycles now, nobody walks now, and we are creating unhealthy citizens in India today. So you need to create great cities which are based on walking, cycling, green areas, buses, BRTs.
We know what
and urban planners are not doing this in India.
I must come in and, the broad thrust of what Amitabh is saying is absolutely correct. But, if you look at what the smart cities are, it's all about non-motorized transport, it is about footpaths, it is about green spaces and so on. So that's one thing. Second thing is that, it's something in the logic of development. When you have a situation where suddenly you could do rates of growth of 6-7%, a lot of people come by, have the capacity to buy cheaper cars.
True.
Your policies are okay. Your policies are to move people around, and you move people around through public transport, etc. But then there has to be a sense of responsibility in your urban governance. I mean, if you have a sanction of 11,000 buses and you're 7,000 buses short, then somebody doesn't have the commuter doesn't have the choice on whether to go by public transport or by his own car, because the public transport is missing. Now, I personally think in that context, Delhi, for instance, Delhi is going to be the 4th largest metro system. Now, it is going to take us some time. Mumbai and Shanghai, one went up and the rest is history. The other one, it got caught up with domestic, local parochial politics. What you need to do is to now decongest, depopulate, go down the road which you are already there, implement it. I was sitting next to the Chief Minister of Delhi at the metro, I said, look, my friend, when? He said, no, I'm going to get 2,000 buses by December, so on. If you have the requisite sanction of buses and you have the metro, then if you build up, the metro is used for the purposes for which it was designed. Otherwise, what's happening is that there's a distortion coming into it, and people will prefer to travel. I mean, members of parliament now arrive on Monday morning and they get off at the Indira Gandhi airport and then take a metro to work. My predecessor, who's now the vice president, when he went on tour, he took a metro from home or the office and then went. So that serves a particular purpose. But one is not a solution for everything. So you need to go down all this, and this is a story which is established. The more advanced and developed a country, the better the walking. I mean, I lived in New York
Absolutely.
for many years, and it's a great city to walk in. And that's the situation here. But we're getting there. We are now putting that emphasis in the smart cities. But as I come back, I think Amitabh makes a brilliant point. Please, you had 190 years of a particular kind of association, and then 67 years of independent India, complete neglect of the urban space, because mentally, rural development, agriculture, that's important.
Yeah.
We are facing another set of problems there. But let us now acknowledge the reality that the urban space is where the action is. The cities provide 90% of your tax receipts, 66% of your GDP, and the rate at which we are going is going to be even higher.
Okay. Well, the point's taken. Junaid?
No, I still think that the fundamental issue is what will be India's governance model of cities. If it's not going to be 74th Amendment and it's not going to be integrated municipal planning through a cadre, it may well just be that incremental shifts that will happen over time. The messy urbanization. But if it's going to be messy urbanization, innovations will be seen across the country, but there'll be innovations that will be crawling, not leaping. There will be a cost to the economy. There's a difference between growing at 7.5% versus growing at 9%. That's the cost the economy will bear. So it's still a question, what will be the trigger of India's governance of its cities? That I think is the key issue.
Yes, Naina, last thoughts, we have to wind
Just,
up.
the fact is that there are some of our cities that got it right. You look at Maharashtra, Nagpur,
Yes.
Thane, Pune. These are...
The mayor of Nagpur is the chief minister of Maharashtra, and that's
So
proven the
there
point.
was the structure of the Zilla Parishad and the way it plays a role, and the quality of the commissioners that came into these spaces have shown the way. So we don't have to look very far. This is India with the same rules and issues we're talking about, even as we try and create this new governance structure to at least laud what is happening here and replicate it. And the fact is that has not happened either. So I think we don't have time. We do have solutions that are staring us in the face, small solutions, like the idea of distributed sewage, like the idea of creating PPPs, like making sure that you reward municipalities for giving away things that they're never going to do, but allow others to do, and begin to create an ecosystem where you actually have a thriving industry, huge number of jobs to be created in provision of public goods and services, and not rely on this municipal cadre which is not built or available or indeed is not going to solve our problems for the next decade. So we have to find solutions that go beyond what we are discussing here.
Okay. Well, the very fact that there is a Janaagraha, a voluntary body, which has ranked cities, indicates that citizen awareness and citizen participation is reaching a level where perhaps it's going to make a difference. I just want to wind up by taking the main points. Yes, it is. And the timing has to be a lot faster, I take your point, Yuri. But, to come back to Maharashtra and to Nagpur that you were referring to, as soon as the mayor of Nagpur became the chief minister of Maharashtra, I understand that he changed the tenure of the mayor to 5 years from 1 year.
That should be done throughout India.
That is where my plea to you, sir.
But
That's
And direct elections.
my plea therefore is that it will make a difference if the central government says that this is a normal way.
First of
You
all,
have a
I don't
well-informed
think-
chief minister.
I don't think we should be unduly harsh on ourselves.
No.
Till you had this focus on urban issues, and I think the Modi government has undertaken the most ambitious program of subvention for planned urbanization anywhere in the democratic world. Now you have to grapple with these things. You look at Delhi, you have a system, you have a central government, you have a state government, you have a lieutenant governor, and you've got mayors elected for limited duration. You look at New York, if you have a problem in New York, you need a Giuliani who comes across and cleans up the law and order, you have somebody else, Bloomberg, who puts in more cycle tracks, etc. We are getting there. I would not want to judge us harshly just because we've been at it for 3 years. The rate at which you're producing some of these schemes, incentivization, etc., and I think you're going to get there. I agree. That's what is going to make the difference between 7.5% and 9%. But I also think that you must allow these changes to come through a process which is participatory.
Absolutely.
I don't think the central government should sit, and central government should incentivize.
Absolutely.
There should be a bit of naming and shaming. This Swachh Sarvekshan which we've carried out now, it covers every Indian city. And I think it doesn't matter whether that urban cadre is from the IAS or is a new urban service, but once the confidential role dossier of the person in charge has a column like we have on, is he or she sensitive to issues of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe? What is the performance on Swachhta? You have that column there, you see how the change will come. And it's coming. During the Sarvekshan, I already see it's a completely new consciousness. But we'll have to go on pressing that, and that will bring in the behavioral change.
Okay, absolutely. I take your point. For the first time, we've had a mayor who has become the chief minister in Maharashtra, and we have a chief minister who has become a prime minister for the first time. So I think, we have hope. We clutch at these straws and expect that that would be the model behavior. I still think that it will matter if you push with examples and with model conduct, and if you push with, say, a municipal cadre, or with, models in spatial planning. These things can be copied by cities which have mayors. So, putting up a model code of conduct or a model spatial planning could have a role, but yes, I think we're getting there in the sense that leaders from cities are managing states and leaders from states are managing the country. So perhaps that is the way out, and we may not have that much time, sir, because problems of environment are knocking. Mumbai has had, fires, garbage fires, and a fire next to our office, which, suddenly caught all of us napping. So we don't have time.
No, but there's a bigger timing problem here.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There is a bigger timing problem here because the minister has correctly pointed out that India is going to build 60 to 70% of its housing in the next 15 years. Now, you can either build it in the 20th century way or in the 21st century way, right? Or infrastructure, correct, Minister? So the window of opportunity does not allow India to wait another 15 years, like it waited for 62 or 67. It has to be done in relatively compact time frames. If you also think of the density of the population that's going to reach its peak in 2030, 2040, you fly over India today, now that everybody's been electrified, and it's just a mass of light, right? So the density, if you add another 400 million people to India's population, cities need to start soaking it up. Other ecosystems will die if they don't. The only way you can actually hope to preserve the environment globally and in India in particularly is compact cities surrounded by a green belt that actually grows its food, because someday carbon pricing will be included in food pricing, and local food will someday become cheaper than imported food. Okay. And then a green belt of forest and carbon sink, and then leave the nature alone, because somebody was right. 4% of people can feed the country.
On that idyllic hope, thank you very much, Yuri, Mr. Kant, Mr. Puri, Junaid and Naina for joining in this conversation. I think it has set a lot of brilliant ideas, and let me thank Janaagraha for this excellent idea of ranking cities. I hope Mumbai is first next time. Thank you very much.